Hello, hello. This is Dr. Fred, and welcome to another wonderful edition of the Welcome to Humanity podcast. Today, we are really looking at someone again who I have never really met, but that was introduced to me by friends and introduced to me by really friends of her family or her family friends. And there's an opportunity today to really learn about somebody who's, I don't know, really been up to lots of great things in the world, and I don't really even know what they are. So part of this wonderful job of mine is that I get to interview people for you to listen to what is in their world that turns you on, what resonates with you, what is the contribution that they are making just by being them, what are the things that matter to them that, oh yeah, really matter to you as well. And what can we learn through the power of conversation, connection, communication, and creativity that really has us point to the theme here, which is really welcome to humanity. So today we have Lynn. And Lynn, how do you pronounce your last name exactly, please?
Hellerstein.
Hellerstein. So it's Lynn Hellerstein, and I'm sure there's ways to say Hellerstein and all those things that people mess it up. So I'm going to try to remember it for this conversation anyway. So Hellerstein, Lynn Hellerstein is here, and she's going to share with us a little bit about what she's been up to in life and what matters to her and what's on her mind today. And we'll see what kind of conversation that we can generate that brings some sort of excitement, some sort of passion into your world. And Lynn, welcome to the Welcome to Humanity podcast. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much, Dr. Fred.
It's really great to have you. So if you've listened to any of the previous episodes, and maybe you have just to see what the pattern is in the Welcome to Humanity podcast, you'll know that oftentimes, in order to start a conversation and, really the open-ended nature of starting a conversation, I start with what I call the 9-letter question. And it's a full question. It has 9 letters associated with it. It's grammatically correct. And it throws people back on their heels a little bit because of the broadness of what is implied. So the first thing I'm going to ask you, Lynn, is who are you?
Well, thanks for that question. And I did have the pleasure of hearing some of your interviews, so had a little heads up on it. But it's so interesting because that's been the inquiry I've been in for probably the last 20 years of who am I? Beyond my labels,
Right.
Before it would have been, I'm an optometrist, developmental optometrist, a mother, a sibling, a #1 bestseller, on and on and on. But truly, who am I is something that I've really been exploring since I had a medical health crisis in 2002, and where I'm at right now. And that's, it's really who I create at the moment and then manifest. But where I'm at right now is I'm a person who's inspiring and empowering millions of people to improve their vision so they can see and experience their world through the lens of clarity, courage, and confidence.
Well, that was very poetic. So I'm going to ask you to say it again. It's really something that, falls off your tongue very smoothly and sounds almost like a poem. So try that again. What is it that you are? You're improving and empowering.
Inspiring and empowering millions of people to improve their vision so they can see and experience their world through the lens of clarity, courage, and confidence.
Wow. Well, clarity, courage, and confidence, and then using the lens of their vision. Now, the listener will notice that you said optometrist as well. And so there's something about who you are for the physical eyes. But this is much broader than that. We're talking about getting a vision of what life is about. And we're not talking about just a handful of people. We're talking millions of people. So say a little more about the access that you have and how is it that you're taking steps forward in this really wonderful direction?
Yes, well, for more than 40 years, I've been involved in a developmental vision therapy practice. I'm an optometrist and specialize in helping people really improve their vision, mind-body connections. So from day one, it was well beyond just looking at eyes for health and what are the best glasses. But I was really looking
better,
at
the same, or worse. Better, worse,
one or two. One or two. That's right. And that was my initial access as to trying to help people really see clearly and make sure they didn't have any health problems. And very, very early in my career, I remember one of my patients, she was about 76 years old, and she was a very great artist. And she came in for her eye check. And she had a lot of astigmatism, which is just a way of being blurry, where, most people who wear glasses have an astigmatism prescription in there. And so I gave her the prescription and she could see 20/20. And she said, "Oh, honey, I see so clear. This is wonderful. But I never am going to wear these glasses." And I said, "Betty, you're about 2100 without your glasses. It's really blurry for you." She says, "Oh, I know that, but I'm an artist. I need to see so much more of the world. These glasses make me focus so clearly. I don't notice all the other things that are going on in the world."
Wow.
And coming out of school after 8 years of college and, all this experience, is like, what is she talking about? And that started me on the courses. So what is she talking about? What else is there besides what most people tap into? I see 20/20, everything's great.
Yeah, it's almost like the perils of being too focused, the perils of having perfect vision, the perils of being so refined that you can't see outside of 20/20.
Exactly. It sometimes gets you so narrowed into, this is so clear, and you have no idea what's happening peripherally around you, much less other senses.
Wow.
And so that started me on a course as, what am I missing? And as I continued through my 40 years of working with kids that had learning problems and adults that had brain injuries and concussions and athletes who wanted to improve their performance, they helped me learn as to how important all of it is. Not only just seeing, but integrating with other senses. And I spent about 20 years in more traditional vision therapy, improving people's skills to track and focus and coordinate their eyes and improve their depth perception and improve their eye-hand coordination, and got a lot of success in performance with these people. But then there was more. As we started working with more and more of these patients, often, I'll give you an example, a little 7-year-old who was having a terrible time reading. She couldn't track, she couldn't focus, she couldn't read. If you just asked her how reading was, she would just break into tears. She had very significant visual problems, which we treated. She got a lot better in her tracking, but she still saw herself as a really poor reader. Internally, mentally, visualized herself as not successful. And so just seeing herself read would make her cry. And so I started, because of some of my own personal experiences, working on internal visioning as well, which many people will call visualization, but became very multisensory imagery, and started looking at patients. Not only do they have the optimal visual skills for performance, whether it's basic reading or to be a great athlete, but does their internal vision really match their external world?
So this multisensory vision, this is really great. I really see that as a listener to you right now, I'm noticing myself bending a few of the words that I, up until now, thought I knew what they meant. And, like seeing and vision and visualization, that these words are not restricted to the realms that are their default. When I say I see, perhaps I'm not just seeing with my eyes. When I say that I have good vision, perhaps that has nothing to do with 20/20. When I have a visualization, perhaps that's not a meditative dream, but that's actually an internal multisensory experience. And I really am curious about how you integrate that now. And what is the goal of optimizing? What is the goal of inspiring and empowering me through, or others, your clients or your patients or your friends and family cohorts? Where are you headed when someone shows up asking you for assistance? What's the outcome, if you will? What's the focal point?
Well, you used a lot of visual terms in that
indeed.
big question. And let me first start with just visualization and some of the definition.
Okay.
Much of the work that I've done and others have done for all these years is misunderstood because of the languaging.
Right. That's what I'm
if you go to the doctor
Mm-hmm.
and they say you have perfect vision 20/20, I have had so many patients that have double vision and terrible depth perception and tracking and told their vision's perfect. If you use the very narrow definition of 20/20, that's one of about 17 skills for visual performance.
Interesting.
But it's what's popular, what people know, and that's what they hear. So that in itself already gets confusing as to why am I in your office? I see great. The nurse just told me I see great. And again, literally, and I know we're not on video, but somebody will walk in with crossed eyes and be told they have perfect vision for seeing.
Mm-hmm.
But vision goes much beyond that. Vision's really understanding what we see, processing what we see. And I'm interested in how do you use that vision? How does that integrate with other sensory motor skills? And a lot of that background I experienced because in my office, one of my vision therapists is actually an occupational therapist. And a lot of people get confused. What is an occupational therapist? Parents will say, wait, my kid's only 7. He doesn't need a job.
Right.
But OTs in the medical world, often in stroke and rehab, are helping people regain their functional daily living activities. OTs in the kids world are often working with kids that don't really coordinate body skills well, or their whole sensing system's off. Like you might touch them and they scream because it feels too hard. And learning with the OT, vision is part of this whole big sensory motor system. And my goal is to help integrate with the collaboration of other specialists sometimes, integrate all sensory motor skills. And that gives a person the best chance of moving through this world at whatever they're going to do, whether it's school, sports, play, work. So as I learn those skills of sensory motor, for example, if you try to teach a little kid to track, but they can't even balance themselves when they're sitting, you're not going to get very accurate tracking until you really developmentally go to some of the more basic general skills. And so that was my background and training of integrating vision with other sensory processing skills.
Well, so the kinesthetics, the balancing, the mixture or cross latticing, the interdigitation between what I call my vision through my eyes and then what I have through my ears and my touch and my taste and my smell, and also any other senses that we might have beyond those big 5. My guess is that if we're going to say that 20/20 is 1/17 of what it takes to have perfect vision, we could probably also say that these 5 senses are quite limited as well, and that there's a whole set of sensory perceptions that sit outside of those 5 basic, sight, smell, hear, touch, and see. It's a lot to ask. And I wonder, when you say like the interrelation between the sensory motor skills, is vision and hearing more intimately related than vision and some of the other skills? I tend to think that my eyes and my ears are my 2 dominant players. They're the ones that I'm really learning about the world from day after day. Maybe I'm spending too much energy looking at my eyes and my ears and disregarding some of the other sensory input possibilities. And maybe I'm not paying enough attention to them, and I too am imbalanced. How do we integrate all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've learned really the hard way. Coming out of school, vision being my specialty, I always assumed vision was the dominant sense in our lives and in learning. And if you look at brain neurology and the correlates of where vision takes place in the brain, it seems like there are many more visual connections than other sensory systems. However, I've spoken at auditory and speech language groups where they'll vehemently argue that their system. And so it's not a matter of which is dominant, because I think it's quite unique to each person. And I found that out first when I started in traditional vision therapy, and then really learned about it when I started working on visualization, which is taking all that I've said about multisensory and taking it internally. So often when we go to visualization, people always think about the third eye, the mind's, third eye. But as I started doing visualizations with people, and I would say, relax, close your eyes, imagine, right away I'd lose some people when I'd say, like, imagine a beautiful, mountain scene. Now, the majority of people are often running with that, and they describe the peaks. But I'd give them a whole scenario. Imagine going to the beach and notice the coolness of the air and the sunlight and the sand between your toes and the fresh smell. And what I was doing is multisensory stimulation there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. If I just left it open and say, imagine going to the beach, what do you notice? Some people would say, oh, the ocean's so beautiful and the waves. Some people would say, wow, the sun's too hot. Some people would say, I love how the sand feels. So people would describe their experience when left without guidance through all different sensory systems. And I learned that it's not about right or wrong or better or worse. It's how that person operates and learns to be able to acknowledge and be aware of those systems. But really, integration is trying to be able to bring in and tolerate all systems somehow, but know that you have some dominant and then you have some support systems.
Do you find that someone who answers the question, like a beachfront visualization, and they say, oh yeah, I can feel the sand between my toes, that if you were to interview them the next week in another scene, that they would be more likely to choose the tactile approach again? So is it part of my personality, that I tend to be tactile, or I tend to be auditory, or I tend to be olfactory? Is it random per event, or is that a certain go-to sense that I call my dominant one, the one to describe life from?
Yeah. My experience is a pretty much that's your choice. That's the way you're built. And a cue in how you can find this out. And, this is taken from some research from salespeople. Salespeople really want to know what's your best way of getting information. Like, are you a visual learner, as teachers would say? Are you an auditory learner? Are you tactile? Right. And salespeople learn to figure that out because they want to get their information through the system that you're most dominant and will probably pay most attention to. So if you're a very auditory person and all they're doing is showing you pictures, you may not have really gotten the pitch. And so my experience has been you can listen to people's language and watch their body posturing and usually tell what their predominant sense of processing might be. And it's not totally clear cut, but if you listen to their language, like, I'll see you later, imagine, notice, all very high visual terms, versus talk to you later, I hear you.
Yeah.
Very auditory, versus keep in touch. And if you start watching people,
that's interesting. If
you ask a question, where'd you go on your last vacation? Often what you see is that they're staring either up or kind of straight ahead. And then, this is not 100%, but frequently, and it may be for just a moment. And you'll see like they're rewatching the movie of what went on in their head. If you see a person, and we're interested in this because we use visualization, for example, to help kids learn how to spell better or comprehend their work better. And we'll give them a spelling word to take a picture of, and we go through a whole process, how to see the word, what does it look like, actually draw it out and feel it. So we're bringing a kinesthetic with a vision picture. And then to spell it forward, spell it backwards. And it's like miracle. Most of the kids spell it backwards, and the parents go, how did they do that? Well, you can watch them and you see where they get stuck by just watching their body posturing.
Interesting.
But if you have a kiddo and you're teaching them to spell, and then I'll say, go ahead and spell that backwards. And they immediately drop their head, look down, eyes go down. That's more often than not, they're into a different processing, sensing, which is more kinesthetic, and their negative self-talk. I can't do this. I'm stupid. This is too hard. And by just body observations, often that you can help shift them to find where their answers are. There's an interesting book by Dr. Judith Willis, who's a neurologist by training, who teaches kids how to understand their brain, and that if their brain has been hijacked, they're not going to find any answers when they're in that part of the brain, if they're frustrated and they're yelling and screaming, and to start acknowledging their own brain so they can learn how to get into resourceful places so then they can learn.
Well, this is really a great conversation. Thank you, Lynn. And there's so many different spaces that I could go to from here in my inquiry. And so the couple things that are coming up are, one question I have for you immediately, are those corrective lenses that you're wearing?
That's a great question. It's not corrective lenses for distance. The glasses I have on right now are set for computer distance, so that I don't wrench my neck trying to find the right lens to be clear on the computer.
Yes.
They also have a special coating for the glare that we all get, the blue light.
So that blue blocking kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay.
And they have a bifocal for reading. And I leave them right here at my computer, and they are just, yes, they have correction in it, but for a specific distance of my occupation. And that's another thing we do. Now with computers and monitors, people are getting neck and shoulder and back and arm problems from trying to get through the correct lenses to see at a distance that we weren't born to really function at very well.
Oh, that's interesting. So maybe my lenses are corrected. They tell me I'm farsighted. And so maybe my lenses are corrected for certain environments. But if I'm spending all my time now looking at pixelated screens, perhaps a different lens would be more optimal to not only protect my eyes, but to offer me a better visual field, a field more accurate or more complete. Is that what you're suggesting?
Exactly right. And use the analogy of shoes. Does one pair of shoes get you, useful for everything you do? And you have specific shoes for specific activities.
That's really great. Okay. Well, I've never thought of that. That's very interesting. So I have these lenses here. These are my blue blocker lenses, and I don't wear them enough. And I have the lenses that I wear now. And I wondered when you told your story of that 2100 lady that if she was going to say that she didn't want to wear the lenses because she didn't like the frames or something like that. She didn't like how she looked, or that it, didn't go with her hair, or didn't go with her car color, or, people make funny decisions like that. So, there's the surgeries, there's the Lasik surgery, there's contact lenses, hard and soft, there's, glare proof lenses, there's bifocals and monofocals, and there's all of those things that come from a typical visit to what seems like a high ticket optometrist. And, I walk out like happy that I can see better than when I first walked in. That's how I measure it, right? I mean, it seems like that's a total way to do it. You walk into the optometrist, and if you can walk out sometime later a few $100s poorer with a vision that somehow feels better, that feels like a success story. But I think what you're suggesting is it doesn't get measured on a binary linear way. If you want to look at the whole life implications of what it means to see, and that we're looking at, a multisensory measurement tool, a metric that isn't measured by the clickable lens changer that the optometrist uses. It's measured by something else, like being attuned with the life around us or something close to that. Can you speak to what metric is out there, or what is it that you utilize to be satisfied with the outcome of your work?
Yeah, that's again another great question, because we are limited in our metrics. And there's no question, measuring a prescription is not necessarily what we prescribe. There are a lot of people, and many of your listeners who wear contact lenses, know that they often will feel like they see a lot better in their contact lenses than their glasses. And if you put them on a chart, sometimes their glasses, they see 20/20, and maybe their contacts, they may not quite see 20/20, yet they insist they see better because they have so much more visual field and peripherals open and all that. So the metrics we use are to try to get a direction of about how much prescription to give, but then that's the art of prescribing. What is it that is going to help you function best? That's why in healthcare it's become very difficult, because of the way, just insurance and lots of factors, that when you see a doc for 5-10 minutes and you get a prescription, and I'm sure, it's with prescription of drugs too. I mean, you have limited information, limited measurements. You go with probably what's going to work best. And for a lot of people, it's going to be very helpful. But if you want to go beyond that and get rid of these chronic headaches that you didn't realize that maybe your glasses are giving you, or be an athlete where okay visual skills is not what's going to allow you to be a super athlete. Premier visual skills. Most athletes see 2 or 3 lines better than 20/20. So just getting to the quote average may not be adequate. Many of my patients that have had concussion have been told your eyes are fine. Well, we know there's a very high incidence of visual problems post-concussion, but their eyes are healthy. Their prescriptions may or may not have changed, but their brain's been impacted in areas, where visual processing takes place. And so we have a whole nother battery of tests besides, which is better 1 and 2, and the health of your eyes to really look, some of them look like some of the types of neuropsych tests to look at the processing speed and size and shape and form. So we really look at functioning and then look at overall skills. What are the goals? When you asked about for success, the success for one person may be where we start the next person in therapy.
Right.
And it's all about being on the journey of, what's important to you and how would you want to really enhance and improve yourself.
Right. So optimization in the areas of life that matter to me is more what we're after.
Yeah. If you don't care about, being a super athlete and getting superior depth perception skills and things like that, then the glasses you have may be perfectly fine. You're functioning well, no complaints. There's a wonderful book written by Dr. Sue Berry, who's a neurobiologist, I believe. She used to teach at the university level. She was born with crossed eyes, had several eye surgeries, had glasses. And when she was in her 40s and 50s, all of a sudden she started getting double vision. And she had already had surgeries and all of this. And so she started down the course of vision therapy initially to try to get rid of what we could measure as double vision. Well, what happened to her in her life is far beyond what you could ever measure. And her book talks about the first time she sat in her car and all of a sudden the steering wheel became three-dimensional and it's out in space, and how her whole body, her whole mind, everything changed in this world looks different. I am different in this world. And her book so beautifully, you can actually Google her. She's been on NPR. That talks about how her world has changed as she really started making shifts in her visual system, even after traditional, research used to say after the age of 7 or 9, you can't necessarily change how you can see. And, she disputed all the things she used to teach and showed that there was neuroplasticity available at this age and how well she could take advantage of it.
Wow.
Yeah, she's a story in Oliver Sacks's books as well.
Yeah, Oliver Sacks was someone I was just going to address, actually. That's very interesting. I thought when I was like, oh, she's just about to address Oliver Sacks. And then you addressed her and now you're on him. So you did still beat me to him. I was going to address some of what he has written. I have written down a number of things, different areas that I could go to, curiosity. So, and I'm going to give you 6 or 7 of them. I doubt that we're going to be able to delve into all of them, but maybe we can interdigitate them. And there's, the value of contact lenses and contacts versus conventional lenses, versus eye exercises, and then, soft and hard. And then, really, I think another question that the public often asks is the permanent nature or the Lasik intervention for eye correction, what your thoughts might be about what the value is one way or another. I imagine you do have an opinion about Lasik surgery, about the impact of Lasik surgery on vision, visualization, and overall optimization of life. But when looking at Oliver Sacks, I start looking at, his book Hallucinations or The Man Who Mistook, his wife for a hat. And the short stories that he talks about, they tend to have a visual edge, that there's something the people are seeing that other people aren't seeing that, would then therefore be called an illusion or a hallucination or an altered reality or alternative reality or an expanded consciousness or those kinds of things, which appear to manifest themselves through our vision, through, at least a little bit through what we see, pattern recognition or sacred geometry, and those kinds of things that can come as visualizations as we walk through the world. They seem to be something that the average optometrist wouldn't take on, but that you would take on, that it's very much part of the measurement of, a visualization and the impact of visualization on optimizing life. Now, really, Lynn, I have about 4 more things, but I've just spit out so much that I wonder if you can kind of take me off the road here and pick up some of the things I just said and offer your insight or opinion about some of them.
Sure. Contact lenses, LASIK in itself is a whole lecture that honestly, I don't even fit contacts anymore. My partner does all of that. But I certainly talk to the patients, and there's a lot of things to weigh in contact lenses. The patient has to be really interested to take care of them. A lot of people think it's like, throw away your glasses, got rid of that problem. Well, you take a whole new set of taking care of the lenses, cleaning. Most people love them because they feel like they see more cosmetically. It used to be cosmetically, get the glasses off your face, but now glasses are so fashionable. That's not always the issue. There's often self-esteem issues that go along with that. Kids are making fun of me. There's certain contacts that can help prevent and sometimes reduce nearsightedness. There's brand new lenses now to try to reduce the nearsightedness, especially with young kids. Softs versus gas perms. It depends on the prescription, on the goals, on your eyes, if it's associated with eye disease. So there's nothing right, wrong, better, worse. What's necessary is for you to be with a doctor who takes the time to really find out what are your goals, what are the best lenses for your eyes, and what's the prognosis. They're great for sports, but if it's a sport that's really dusty, you have a whole new set of problems,
Right.
So contacts is very interesting, a very big part of my practice. And then some people want to do Lasik, which again has to be a personal choice. For most people, it's highly successful. And they often are very happy, see better. But people don't realize when they get to be 40 and 50 years old, you can't read that small print anymore. There's still going to be some visual issues down the road. And some people think once they get Lasik, they'll never wear glasses again. So it's all about education. Be really educated, do your research, make sure whoever you're seeing answers your questions, and make sure that for one person, it's the best thing in the world, and the other person, it may be the worst thing. So just many choices on that. Regarding all the Oliver Sacks, and, that's where my real heart is in the neuroplasticity and changing lives. I wanted to share a story that's actually in my new book, Expand Your Vision. This is about a young boy. He was about 9 years old when he was referred to me. He suffered a severe concussion from a motorbiking accident and ended up being one of those kids they didn't know if he'd live, much less function, much less walk, talk, whatever. Went through rehab. He had severe injuries, but recovered everything but his vision was really the worst part of the injury. He had double vision. He lost almost 2/3 of his field of vision. So if he were to look at you, Fred, he wouldn't see half of you unless he turns his head in the bottom part. And he had double vision and focus issues, tracking problems. We worked with him, and by the time we were finished with him, and this kiddo, who I did not know before, actually was gifted. He'd been identified as gifted. So we went far beyond whatever anybody ever would have projected anyways. He ended up graduating top in his high school class. He played baseball, which he was the best pitcher, but I was always afraid if somebody hit the ball back to him, there's no way in the world he'd see it because he doesn't have the field of vision. He then went to college, went to the very high engineering school, couldn't drive because of his field loss. Then was accepted in medical school. Always wanted to be a doctor, couldn't drive, and couldn't really pour things very well because of the spatial problems, but figured out ways to do the rest of the world. So when you talk about measurements, if you look at his measurements, you would say, don't ever go to medical school, don't ever do this. And all he did was do it and do it well. And ended up with a premier residency. And then within 3 months of this first residency, he calls me and I can hardly hear him. And he said, because he couldn't drive, he was always walking. He was walking in a crosswalk with his headphones on and got hit by a young kid texting and ran through the light. Suffers a second. Now he has a brain bleed. All of the old stuff comes back and more. Has an injured hand.
So Oliver Sacks immediately. That's like, oh yeah, he's all over that.
Unbelievable.
Right.
Unbelievable.
Right.
So the kid, he's now an adult. He's an MD. And the medical system did not allow him to heal. They wanted him back, for the 16, 18-hour days, big shifts. And he just couldn't do this. Wow. And we were working with him. He was getting better. But they sent him for another eye appointment. Because, we were telling them about all the problems. They wanted another opinion. The eye doctor took one look at his visual fields and said, you should never be a doctor. You've lost most of your vision. And this destroyed my patient. He gave up being a doctor, decided that could never happen. He came back to me and he brought the fields, and I pulled out his visual fields from almost 20 years ago. And I said, Trevor, has this changed? And they hadn't changed at all. What had changed was the language of the other doctor saying he couldn't see, and he started believing that he couldn't see.
Indeed.
Yeah. So that's the power of the language and the words and the beliefs. And how do you measure that?
Yeah, I am intimately aware of how reality gets created by what people tell you about who you are and where your limitations are. That's so much of what I've been doing the last 40 years. So I truly appreciate that story. It's really great. And, prayers for Trevor, whatever he's up to now. And, it's stories like that that really make us the plasticity, the neuroplasticity that's really available in each and every day. Are there things that we can do? I think of Ray Charles or Stevie Wonder or some of the folks who are amazing artists in one sensory mode, perhaps, and on the heels of having visual loss as a primary component of who they are. And it's like an overcompensation, they say, that other senses sort of step in to take over, maybe a synesthesia kind of experience that then is enhanced and capitalized on. Is there compensation? So if one would lose their actual optic sight, optic visualization capacity, does hearing and feeling and smelling and touching and all these other, I guess I'm hearing, feeling, smelling and tasting, do they actually become enhanced? Is that your experience that without vision or without standard vision, the other senses step in and it take up some of the slack?
I would love to believe so. I don't really know, and I've questioned that a lot. There's studies on doing visualization with kids that have been born blind, so they've never had light. And they'll have them do drawings or building, and there's huge differences in kids' ability to visualize, whether or not they had the primary sensory system. I think, in a way, those folks that have really lost their vision, and a lot of people lose partial vision, which is different than total vision. It's terribly different than that. But I think there's different levels of visualization. I think to survive, they have to have a belief system to empower them to start being aware and paying attention to other resources.
Exactly.
And if they do, I believe that they can be developed and much more aware and sensitive to that. I think so much belief. A quick story. I had a patient who had very severe cerebral palsy, was in a wheelchair, can't talk, can't eat, can't move. And this kiddo was a great writer, creative writer. And I saw his book and I met him. I go, how do you write? And he was fitted with an auditory system that would say predictive words, and word by word, he'd move his head to hit the microphone to put the word on the computer. But what he told me was he had a therapist at a very early age to teach him to visualize the pattern of the auditory words so he could predict and know what's coming and know when to hit it. Wow. And he thought the power of visualization, and he had significant vision problems too, but that's what gave him the ability to write.
Right. It's like imagination and creativity is a sense in and of itself, or is a domain to work with, that the backdrop, the media that senses play with is inside of our world of generating and innovating imagination and creativity as a direct function or a direct contributant to our sensory perception. Is that a fair assessment?
It's a beautiful assessment, I guess.
I have to say so. It's pretty beautiful. I'll take
it truly is. And that's where expand your vision to what? I mean, there's just more out there to be aware of and open up the possibilities of all of that.
Well, I am now going to take this risk then. Thank you so far for all of that. And the risk is really looking at a bridging gap between your field and what we'll say has been my field in the world of mental health, which is, are there suggestions or prescriptions or recommendations in the world of not only diet, but we have done some work in performance enhancing drugs, or in, of course, this up and coming world of psychedelics that, among many different experiences that psychedelics provide, either in the plant form or the laboratory form of psychedelic allies or medications, certainly the visual component gets a great deal of attention. That, watching the walls breathe, or hallucinating someone who otherwise others can't see, or having animals or totems or pattern recognitions or sacred geometry show up inside of the visual field once a psychedelic medication or a plant medicine is taken. The visualization almost always, it seems, is dragged into the experience as being an indicator of the intensity of the experience itself. Do you have something to say about the South American plant allies or, of course, the laboratory allies such as lysergic acid diethylamide or LSD or maybe ketamine or some of the other drugs that cause visual alterations? Does this have any kind of long-term effect on what you're calling vision?
That's so interesting. I don't have personal experience with that. I listen to a lot of functional medicine podcasts and are very interested in that possibility. Long term, I will say, because I do have a lot of experience in, some courses of meditation over days and being in a whole nother place, that the awareness that changes and transforms when I am just doing that type of an activity to quiet the mind, of the breathing, the light, and the awareness, and the sensing, walking in a room and already sensing energy. I believe a lot of that's already available to us, but we're too cluttered and aren't aware. So thinking what a medication or drug like that might be available is really fascinating. Long term, I'd be asking you that question.
Well, I know that, for the little bit, even in cannabis ceremonies that I've partaken in, that my right eye and my whole right side is loosened up frequently so that I get a stereoscopic view of life around me that otherwise it seems restrained or constrained without the medication or without the enhancement. So I get a relaxed view that I can see myself in the mirror. Like, my left eye is actually focused on my left eye and my right eye is focused on my right eye. And then, the nystagmus seems to be reduced. And what I really have is an opportunity, like a relaxation into a grander experience of this broader sense of focus. So not like focusing down laser, but focusing broad, like our friend said, wait a minute, if I have to see so good, I'm going to miss what's on the outside. And that these medications really do affect how and again, you have to put in quotes, how I see the world. How I see the world is altered fundamentally by walking through some of these experiences. Like, holy cow, this is very real. This fractalization or the geometrics or the pattern recognition or the colors or enhanced colors or the depth perception or the interface between objects, the sweet or the macro versus micro, watching an ant versus watching a sky full of stars. It seems like reality, like the lady you were just saying, when the world instantly became three-dimensional, that alters her life instantaneously. There are no aspects of her life virtually that are unaffected by that particular visual experience. Like, whoa, all of life just shifted. We got given a fourth dimension or a third dimension. Any comment about any of that?
Well, first of all, a comment of your language has so many visual terms in it, I couldn't write them down fast enough.
I'm kind of gearing that for you, but I think I am. I get that. I am very visual.
So it's just fascinating hearing your descriptions. Again, I think in my work, I've had the opportunity of taking the cap off and opening up those possibilities, maybe not nearly at the depth like these drugs would. But what it shows is what's in our brain is so far beyond what we call typical vision and what we might have access to. I feel like I'm a pioneer in the work of exploring in that and seeing that what could be possible in our vision is just so much more than how we're using it right now. And whether or not these types of, plants and drugs end up being really helpful in the long term or help, may not, that's to be seen. But that's the excitement of expanding your vision.
Yeah, it's super awesome. It's a great field that you're in, and I love your passion for it. I think I'll bring us down to earth with this next question a little bit, which is, I remember being told that carrots would be good for my, there's some sort of like easy Bubba-meisters out there that is like, oh yeah, vitamin, whichever vitamin it's supposed to be, C or D or what, like, oh yeah, that'll help your vision. My real question for you is, are there things to either avoid in our diet or make sure that we get enough of so that our vision is at least optimized and not hurt through what things we put in our mouth?
I think that's a question for the whole body, and the eyeballs are just a piece of the body.
Exactly.
In that, here in Colorado, dry eye is a real problem because it's so dry climate-wise here. And people need a lot of fish oils and fatty acids and things like that. We found out for years, I've been interested in macular degeneration, which is when the retina starts breaking down. And again, I've always been interested in functional vision, and those docs are prescribing a lot of antioxidants. Well, finally, after all these years, even in ophthalmology, there's a specific set of antioxidants that may really be helpful in stopping or slowing the macular degeneration. So my next question is, well, what do we do to prevent it so we don't have to get to that point? And now they're beginning to look at that. I think a lot of our visual problems, at least from a pathology standpoint, is environmentally induced from, the sun and not getting appropriate protection from the sun. You can get sunburn eyes. You can, people who work a lot around radiation and certain lights could get cataracts. So I think the eyes are just kind of one microcosm of the entire body.
Yeah. That
what we're doing environmentally to ourselves and all the toxicities we're measuring. But the eyes are also, the key to the soul, the window to the soul. And we're finding that some of the testing we do, like some of the ultrasounds and testing we do in the retina, may be now predictive of early Alzheimer's and some autism kinds of things are coming out. So because the eyes are the only part of the body you really can look inside and see blood vessels and see, the world of your body without having to do surgery, I think they give us lots of information about our body that goes beyond just the eyeballs and the vision.
Oh, you just reminded me of the ophthalmoscope. I had that, what was it called?
Welsh Allen.
Welsh Allen. I had a great Welsh Allen in medical school, and I used to love looking in people's eyes. That was just so much fun to see all the pulsating and all the veins and little, arterials. Anyways, that was fun. Okay. Wow, Lynn. So this was a great discussion. Thank you for sharing yourself with us. You wrote a book. We didn't spend that much time today. If you can give us just a minute or two about, your book and then how people can get it. I imagine our listeners are very curious about what your most recent work has been in the written world. Tell us a bit about your book and how people can follow you.
Surely. Thank you. My original book was in 2009 called See It, Say It, Do It, which is for parents and teachers how to help their kids learn to visualize, declare, and take action. It's like what big businesses and sports people would do. And what if we really approach kids when they're doing their homework and got them to see the big picture and buy in and declare it and take action? So that was the first book. My most recent book, I have a sports book, 50 Tips to Improve Your Sports Performance. And then my most recent book is called Expand Your Vision, How to Gain Clarity, Courage, and Confidence. And that's really where I'm at. That was developed for my keynote in 2016 at the Conference of Global Transformation. How can I start pulling this together in my own mind and understand and put it on paper? And I did it through patient stories of what they've taught me, how they've gone beyond just the routine eyesight, vision, and their successes in the world, doing therapy on a 75-year-old Ironman and getting them back into the Ironman competition.
That's amazing. I love that. That's great. And what about your email and how people can find you, a website or something like that for people? Yeah. Go ahead.
My website is lynnhellerstein.com, LYNN, and HELLERSTEIN.com.
Okay.
And you can actually write me at DRH, Dr. H, at lynnhellerstein.com.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much again. And what an enriching conversation, a conversation that, sparks the imagination and expands the visual fields of all of us, in the broader sense, like what it means to be human and what it means to enhance or take hacks into our humanity so that we can optimize our experience here on Earth using not only our eyes, but our entire source of vision. So thank you so much for really describing that so eloquently and for having a great conversation. Is there anything you would like to say in closing to either me or to our audience?
Well, a big thank you to you, Fred. My gratitude for what you're doing and helping people expand their humanity. And I love that. And your podcasts that I've listened to have been wonderful. And I'm honored to be part of that podcast group. And so big thank you.
Deep pleasure. You're welcome. And there you go, listeners. I mean, it is a blast, right? We get to meet some great people who are up to great things, and they're just naturally going through the world one step in front of the other, just like each of us are, and then have found some sort of purpose in life, some sort of commitment, some sort of declaration that matters to them, some sort of vision for the future. And today it's been all about vision. So thank you for joining us for this wonderful episode of Welcome to Humanity. And what you see there is your life. And, by seeing, I'd like you to consider going out into your world and seeing that seeing is way bigger than what you thought seeing was. So welcome to humanity, everyone. Have a beautiful day. We'll catch you on the next episode of Welcome to Humanity. And thanks again, Lynn. And we'll catch you on the flip side as well. Bye for now, everybody.